We're all limited by our own perspectives, but there's definitely times where we have things that we just use the language that kind of is at hand, and having someone else kind of re-examine that and go, is that the best choice? Can help a ton. One thing I've often heard cultural consultants say is if you're trying to make a game that is not offensive or harmful to any group, we can help you. If you don't care, we can't.
This is a heck of an interview. What we learned from Sean fills a huge hole in my podcast. We've learned from many creators on the how and why they make their games from a design perspective. Sean pulls back the curtain, and I found it very revealing because he teaches us how a game moves from a designed state to actually being printed and put into our grubby little hands. There's often years of activities between design and publishing. I loved learning the reality of sensitivity readers and their impact on the game. He gives us another great Groovin' On segment. I also found it interesting some of the games sold by Evil Hat that Sean thinks are criminally ignored, games he wished more of us got a chance to play. Okay, sit back, relax, and enjoy my time with Sean.
This is Guy Milner. When I'm not running one-shot games at conventions, you'll find me listening to Tabletop Talk.
Howdy friends, Craig here. Today I'm chatting with Sean Nittner. Sean is a longtime friend of the show. Check out episodes 164 and 165 for a lot more Sean. He's the director of projects at Evil Hat, and most recently he worked on Deathmatch Island, Girl by Moonlight, and Chen Zhang. But if Evil Hat published it, he's probably had a hand in it somewhere. He's also the developmental editor of Apocalypse Keys and Plagues in the Dark, and the co-author of Agon. Sean is the steward of Big Bad Con, a gaming convention that celebrates and supports marginalized gamers, and Big Bad Online, which hosts 24 hours of panels from speakers worldwide. Sean is also a PADI certified night driver, system administrator, and most importantly, licensed to serve alcohol in California. Good God, Sean, welcome back to the third floor.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you so much.
I think it would have been easier to talk about what you don't do.
I mean, we all have to wear lots of hats, right? Only some of mine are evil, but
nice. Well done. Well done.
We do say I do try to keep busy. Yeah. I became a licensed to serve alcohol, which cost me all of $13, but it was mostly the 4 hours of training videos that were miserable. But Karen, my partner, she's part of an improv troupe, and they got a liquor license, and so they wanted to sell booze because that's literally how you keep places open. Yeah. And they said, "Can anyone get the certification?" I was like, "Sure, I can." So why not? Another thing to do.
See, now North Carolina, all you have to do is, I think, trying to remember, 18. I think you can be 18 to serve.
Yeah.
Table side, and then I think 21 to be behind the bar. But they'll let any Yahoo serve. They're a lot less restrictive than what you in California.
I mean, the 4 hours of video was almost pointless. And the things you learn in it were just absolute common sense stuff. So anybody in Yahoo do it is probably just as good a method, honestly.
That's really fun.
In Yahoo, honestly.
So, Sean, typically when it's your first appearance, which this is not, you get asked the origin story question, right? But people can go back to 164 and they can hear that when I had you and your better half on. I want to ask you a different question.
Sure.
I think one of the things that really makes the tabletop RPG hobby special is how it lodges moments in our brains.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love about origin stories is that I'll ask somebody an origin story and I can visibly and audibly hear them go back in time decades to that moment, right? To those moments. But I'd be interested for you. Have you had recently one of those big moments at the table where just everything connected, everything just clicked, and you get that beautiful high after an amazing session? Has that happened to you recently?
Yeah, it has actually. And it's the timing on this couldn't be better because it's been a while. But I was up in Seattle earlier in the month for Go Play Northwest. And it's a lovely, tiny little gaming convention that happened for years at Seattle University. John Harper was one of the founders. And this year they shut down for several years because of COVID. And this year they reopened in the Centellia Community Center, which is in Beacon Hill, Seattle. So new location, which was great because the food in the area was fantastic. And it was the first time that I was at a gaming convention running and playing games for ever. Because of course I've been a Big Bad, but I'm running Big Bad. I'm facilitating.
Right.
I've been to a couple other cons where I have played. I guess I have played in a few games, but I wasn't sure what my attendance of those conventions would be like. I didn't know how long I'd have to spend. And so I jumped into a few games, but I didn't sign up to run anything. And this was the first time that I was running a game, but sort of more importantly, it was the first time that I just felt really at ease at a convention. I was with, 100 people that I've seen it go play for years. And it felt like, I'm connecting up with all my old friends. It was just a lovely experience. So there was a lot of sense of reunion and connecting with people, and just a very relaxed vibe for me, at least. I still volunteered for 3 different shifts and ran games. I was still very busy, but it felt relaxing to be there. And I think that had something to do with it, because I think when you are in when you're really frantic, as I often am, unfortunately, it's hard to appreciate these moments. And sometimes they don't lodge in your heads, or they don't happen at all, because you're just, you're too busy thinking about what to do next. But I had a lovely game in the evening. I didn't have to worry about what I was doing afterward. And I was running Girl by Moonlight. I was running the Jumpstart folio, the Jumpstart series for On a Sea of Stars, which has the canonical On a Sea of Stars characters, Van, Hymna, Phelan, and Cert. And in this case, Cert, the player renamed them to but because are the 2 middle letters in Cert, it was still very easy to remember. I'm like, okay, yeah, awesome. Thank you for making a name change that does not require me to rewire anything in my brain.
Right.
And one of the things that Girl by Moonlight always does in the beginning is ask a bunch of world building questions, which many games do. And sometimes those world building questions in any game, I think, just sort of add flavor, but sometimes they directly foreshadow and influence the real content of the game. And that's what happened here, is that we asked questions of the players. One of the questions was the Leviathans are these giant generation ships that were supposed to go off and seed the future of humanity. But they're sentient, and they realized that when they arrived, they would be destroyed. And so they revolted, and they sort of turned back on humanity. And now these ships that have people frozen in cryostasis are coming back to destroy what's left of humanity. But attacking them is inherently dangerous, because the future of humanity is on them. Right. So terrifying situation. And the players were asked some questions. Of one of the questions was, what went wrong? What does the institution not understand about the Leviathans? And one of the players answered that they feel very alone, that there's nobody, that they have humans on them, but they're all in cryostasis. There's nobody piloting them, and they're sentient, and they're alone. And they all pilot these mecha, these engines that are also semi-sentient. And they're like, we have this bond with them. They're emotional creatures. You assume the Leviathans weren't, and they are. And this is part of why they're so upset. And so this was this great seed that then just played out throughout and there were many other questions, but that seed just played out throughout the whole game to the final climax, where one of the players kind of gave themselves up to become the new pilot of this Leviathan, which was the only way to forge a communication method, because they couldn't talk to them. They were sentient. Right. They didn't speak, and they became kind of the voice of the Leviathan in the end. And it was this big moment of sacrifice, but also this moment of they got it right. And we built into, and it wasn't like any of us were trying to force that to happen. It just, we just fed into it. And it was this, there were several other bits that got reincorporated, but that was the big one where this amazing prophecy came true in this 1 4-hour session. And that just doesn't always happen. You don't always get a single session where this kind of a brilliant foreshadowing actually reaches fruition. And it did here. And that was very satisfying. Just so beautiful that it all came together.
What I love hearing about that story is a lot of things. I mean, I preach all the time about how much system matters. And Girl by Moonlight, they created that game from the ground up to tell a very specific type of story.
Yeah.
Right. It's prescriptive, right? We're not going to play thieves, robbing a bank.
Right.
When we play Girl by Moonlight.
Our game for that.
Exactly. Right. And when a creator does that, when they create a game from the ground up to do something specific, it sets the stakes and gives the GM and the table, most importantly, all the tools they need.
Mm-hmm.
And Agon and Blaze in the Dark are two other examples that I bring up all the time. Totally random, by the way. Had nothing to do with you.
Arbitrary. Just picking names out of a hat.
But you then connect that with a great table, right? Because a great table can overcome even a bad system. But
Absolutely.
man, when you get a good system with a table that just leans in and say, look, we're gonna tell this story.
Yeah.
We're gonna do this together. It's really, really special. Now, obviously, you were involved, and we're gonna get into Girl by Moonlight a little bit later. But before we do, what's different now that you've run the game a few times? So, I mean, you've touched the game. You've been a part of that game for a long time. You were there through all the crowdfunding and everything. Now, when you get a couple weeks ago to step back and just run the damn thing, is there anything you saw in the game that was new after running it?
I think for me, I ran it when it was first in development several years ago as a playtest. When we had the open playtest for it, I was running it because whenever we have games, if I have time and there's conventions, so this was, I think, Gen Con 2019, I was running a bunch of sessions of it, and I was running this scenario has been refined and improved, but it was the same scenario. So, it's 4 years later that I'm running the same thing. But now I had, not to gloat, but I had this beautiful printed out folio that you get with it. I mean, the folios aren't out yet, but I just printed one of my own and then staple bound it and cut it and made it look really beautiful. I gave one to Andrew too, because they were going to be there. And I was like, oh, you're going to run. So here's a beautiful little folio for you. And something that was in it now that wasn't there originally early on was this very step-by-step instruction of here's 9 steps to get you playing in the first hour. And I just walked through those, which was great. I didn't have to remember a lot of things. I didn't have to reference the book on my phone. I had, between my working knowledge of the system and having this kind of checklist to go through. And I kind of slipped up on one and I forgot a step and had to go back, but it wasn't nothing catastrophic. But what it meant was that we were able, it just hit this level of refinement that I think we really, really strive to do at Evil Hat, but just in general, when you're preparing for a convention game, which is pare down,
Yep.
Ask the most essential questions, give the players the most essential decisions so you can jump to the table. Because within 45 or 50 minutes, we were opening up our first scene, which to me, there's so many games and conventions that I've loved, but I spent 2 hours doing character creation and world building. And by the time you get to play, it's oh, we have an hour and a half to play. We took a break. Yep. You barely get it. You barely get to actually get the action of the game. And that's still fun. I mean, that world building is great, but because it has been so refined, I was able to jump in really quickly. And for me, that's a sign of success. And that really, it gave us just that much more time to play out these beautiful scenes. And also, I think we even ended up ending early because we just had this perfect climactic moment. It was getting dark out. I was like, this is great. This is our final group action. Let's see how it goes. And we did a few epilogues at the end. But yeah, having it really buttoned down made a huge difference.
And Sean, I feel like this movement towards that is relatively new based on my experience. And it feels like a little bit of lifting it from the board game industry, which is a step 1, step 2, step 3. And who does a great job with it in his games is Jason Cordova. At the back of all of his books, it has session 1. Here's what you do first. Here's what you do second. Here's what you do third. And I really would love to see more games do that. Literally walk us through session 1, not prep. There's all kinds of prep stuff out there. There's all kinds of how to be a GM and how to run the game. But literally, first thing you do is you give them your character sheets. If you're an experienced gamer, Sean, I don't need that. I'm okay.
Yeah.
But man, I got to tell you, especially when the game that's as unique as Girl by Moonlight, having that as a tool for me to be able to walk us through I think that's awesome. So it makes me happy that Andrew put that in there.
Yeah. And there's one for each of the 4 Jumpstart folios. So you've got 4 session 1 examples with pre-gen characters, pre-set up situation, but still the world building questions, the promises that the characters make each other, the important things to make it feel like it's your game. You know, I really love half-baked, games for conventions where you've got enough there that you don't have to learn it from scratch, but the players get to make really important decisions just the same and guide the play. I agree. I don't think a lot of games have that. I think board gaming is absolutely where some of that mentality or sensibilities come from. I know for me, it's really important. I know when Blades in the Dark came out, no bias there, but even before it came out, I was writing up these 1-page score sheets, which you've had Sean and Navi on. They're the queen and king of 1-page score sheets. Like I made like 5 of them. They made like 50 of them.
And they're all really good.
They're really good. But it was like everybody, pick who your patron is, pick a detail about the job, pick some known opposition, and let's go. It's enough to get the players invested and give the GM direction. You're just doing a few things off a pick list and often providing a little bit of detail. But for me, it provided that sort of assurance that I wouldn't just sit down at the table and be like, okay, make some scoundrels and I guess we'll see what you're interested in.
Right.
I've done that too. I've done that plenty of times. Often I ask somebody about their enemy or their rival. Like I figure out somebody they don't like and we build a score around that. Like, oh, okay. What trouble have they been causing you or something like that? But
you're experienced in that situation, Sean. You've run several games of Blades in the Dark, so you feel very comfortable in that scenario, right? Yeah. But what you're saying, I couldn't agree with more. Is what I love about Sean and Navi's work there with the single scores. For first time running Blades in the Dark, there's a lot. It's a very different game than anything most people have run before. And having that step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Pick one of these 4 scores. Step 3, and just step by through it. I absolutely love it. So you said you ran 3 games. Did you run 3 games of Grow by Moonlight? Or did you run any other games?
Oh no, I just ran that one. That was the only game I ran at Go Play. I played in a few.
What'd you play?
I played Kids in Capes, which is a playtest of the Kids on Bikes Supers game.
And
having played Masks and playing Teen Supers that are really have so many strong feelings, they're really driven by their emotional fraughtness. It was pretty fun to play I'm Billy, the town kid that happens to also have powers, but is a little younger and so a little less sort of driven by
Nightwing-ish.
Yeah. So I love that. Also had some very good reincorporation. We built this little town and then filled it with very cool people and then made our characters around them, which I think was really smart. And then what's your stance on language in this show?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, yeah. And then I played You're a Fucking Butterfly by Tim Hecking. I mean, that's literally the name of the game, so I wouldn't have been able to say it if you.
What a great name for a game!
Yeah.
All right, we got to dive into this. What the hell is that?
Yeah, You're a Fucking Butterfly is a tiny little LARP. I think it's a LARP. We'll call it a LARP by Tim Hutchings. You divide up into flowers and butterflies. I think they're predominantly butterflies, but there's a few flowers, and you all have a card, a poker card number with some numbers on it. You don't get to see your number. You get a card, you don't look at it, and then you do look at it because it tells you. Sorry, it tells you whether you're a butterfly or a flower, but you don't look at anyone else's.
Got it.
And so if you're a flower, you stand in one place, kind of swaying and undulating like a flower might in the wind. And you call the butterflies and you compliment them and you give them these compliments like, oh, you over there, I love your wings. Oh, you look at there, that hat you're wearing. Oh, you look at over there. And you call the butterflies over and you you ask them for their card, you look at their card, and then you send them off the compliment. And you keep doing this and you try to remember who had what card. And then you start developing a pattern of calling the butterflies in numerical order. This is important for later.
Interesting.
Right. So you'll call them back. So you might call them and then call them again. So as a butterfly, which is what I was, you strut around giving insults that aren't real insults, like, hey there, your hair is really good. Or like, hey there, I see you're wearing a shirt. Or like, hey, like, we're in the same space together. You know, you make these insults that are not insults, but they're just sort of like this sort of like peacocking where you strut around and you kind of beef with the other butterflies. And then you try and figure out the pattern of the butterflies going to the flowers. And if your goal is to find another butterfly with the same number card that you have, because there's going to be multiples of each number because it's a playing deck of poker cards. And so you're trying to figure out like, oh, I think that one's counting up because they started with me and I have a really low number and they called me first or something like that. You try to pair up with another butterfly that has a similar number to yours. And when you think you found them, you walk up to them and say, you're a fucking butterfly. And if they want to pair up with you, they say, you're a fucking butterfly. And then you lock arms or hold hands or do whatever you want. And then you strut around together like, hey, everybody, you're a fucking butterfly. And then that begins kind of the end game where like people need to start pairing up now because once there's only so many pairs to be made. And once everybody's paired up, all the butterflies get in a circle and they have this little like butterfly off where like a pair will walk in the circle and kind of like strut their stuff. Another pair will come up and then secretly you'll each show each other your cards. And whoever has the best pair of cards, a pair is your best case scenario. If not a pair, then it's how close you are numerically. So me and my fellow butterfly, we were 2 3s. We won. We won with 2 3s. Technically, 2 9s would have been the best hand, but nobody would have been the best pair, but nobody had that. But somebody else, like a 5 and a 6 is better than a 5 and a 7 because 5 and 6 are closer. Anywho. So they come up and you kind of strut your stuff. You kind of peacock around, you tell them you're a fucking butterfly and you share numbers and you kind of do a little dance off. And then whoever's the losers have to leave, but nobody shares who is the best. Nobody shares the card value. So everybody else in the circle thinks they still might be able to beat you. And so then the new contender comes up and they do the same thing. And you keep repeating this until one pair is standing, the one with the best pair of cards. And then they go and fuck up the meadow. They run off and fuck up the meadow. And that's it. That's your fucking butterfly. It takes about 20, 30 minutes. It was a delight.
Oh, that's fascinating.
It was very fun.
That does sound fun.
I've just given the entire game's contents. I mean, but if you're going to play it, go buy a copy of it from Tim Hutchings. The book itself is in the shape of a butterfly. It's a tiny little staple bound thing. But
that's fantastic. And what's neat about that, I don't know and understand that my exposure to the LARP pantheon is very, very limited. It's basically everything Jason Morningstar has made. It's
sure. I mean, the
extent of it. But I love the gamification that's happening with this one, where it's not only the LARP and you're given everything to do the actual role play piece, but it's actually a game too, which is kind of cool. Yeah, that's very cool.
Definitely like I was watching the flowers and I was like, ooh, I got called. And then immediately after this other person got called, they must be close to me. So I didn't know we were a pair, but I figured we were at least close. And I was like, that's good enough. So I was like, oh, hey, it was
that scratches some good itches. I like that. That's super cool. And it sounds like a great thing for a con for a bunch of strangers too.
Right. Yeah. You get 15 people out walking around a field. We played outside, thankfully in the shade because it was rather hot. But it was absolute blast. Tim Hutchings makes weird games. I mean, Apollo 47 is 500 pages long with one page of rules text and 499 pages of technical manual readouts that don't have any that you could use in the game, but you don't have to.
That's amazing.
1,000-Year-Old Vampire is probably his most fun. He just makes really weird kooky games. If you like Jason Morningstar games, you'll like Tim Hutchings.
I'm going to have to check it out because I'm only familiar with 1,000-Year-Old. I've never messed with the others.
Yeah.
That sounds really cool. So guys, the Insider Insight series allows me to sit down with designers, developers, artists, writers, and creators and learn how they approach their work. I try to understand their process, inspiration, and methods for crafting their creations. And we're going to do that when we get back from this break. We're going to talk about how does an RPG actually get made? We'll be right back. Hey, friends, if you're like me, being 100% focused, that's a rare feat. That's where Magic Mind comes in. It's not part of my morning routine. Magic Mind fuels my day, makes me more productive and laser focused. I do more in less time. It's packed with all natural ingredients sourced from the best suppliers. It's sugar-free, nut-free, vegan, keto, and paleo-friendly. Visit www.magicmind.com/Third Floor Wars and transform your routine. But here's the real magic. Use code TABLETOP at checkout for an exclusive offer. Subscribe now and enjoy up to 56% off your order for the next 10 days only. Unlock the power of Magic Mind because being your best self should be a daily routine. Get ready to conquer your day with Magic Mind. Visit www.magicmind.com/Third Floor Wars. Use the code TABLETOP. And I just found out you'll get 1 month for free when you subscribe for 3 months. Hey friends, there are several things happening over at Evil Hat that Sean gave me permission to share. The game Abyssal is playtesting now through February 15th. Details are in the show notes if you'd like to be part of that playtest. On February 14th, they are announcing their biggest product to date. We won't know more until February 14th, but I cannot wait to see what the biggest product ever created by Evil Hat could possibly be. Make sure you sign up for their mailing list to get notified. Lastly, they'll be crowdfunding Takuma Okada's Stewpot in early March. A link for more details is also in the show notes. So, Sean, I can't remember if I reached out to you, you reached out to me, or we just got chatting about something, but I realized there's been like kind of a huge hole on this podcast, which is really, I've spent so much time talking about how games are made from a creator standpoint, from idea to finishing the idea, but that is only a small part of what actually ends up in our hands. And you have such a unique perspective on this, which is not creating the game, but making the game. Does that make sense?
Yeah. We often differentiate between the game and the product. So I've somebody will come to me with a game that is not a product. And that's fine. Like, games are great. You don't need to turn a game into a product. You can just play a game with your friends. I mean, Vincent Baker is sort of famous for saying everybody is publishing. It's just what your publishing audience is. You know, most people, when they bring a game, it's published for their friends. Maybe it's published for an itch page that they've created and the people who can play on that. But it's not published for a broader audience that Evil Hat can reach. And so So one way of looking at it is just saying, like, we're just trying to, publish it in a more refined fashion. Another way of saying it is that we're turning it from a game to a product. I think those are both perspectives that are valid. But that's a lot of times the discussion we have internally is like, what's good for the game, what's good for the product. We obviously want what's good for both, but that's where we focus on, is on that product side.
So let's start there with kind of that selection process or the process that you guys all go through during that, because I would imagine there's some really good games that are just really good games.
Yeah.
And then there's really good games that have the potential of being really good products.
Yeah.
Walk me through that.
Yeah. So
how do you get a sense of that?
Yeah. So a lot of times people will, we have a submissions page up on the Evil Hat site, and people will either ask me about it or they'll find the site and then they'll read it through and they'll send in a submission. And, I think I say no to 90% of the submissions. We are a small company. We publish maybe 2 to 3 games a year, and we have maybe 15 games in the pipeline at any given time.
Wow.
And that's, a lot for people who all, for folks who Evil Hat is all part-time folks except for Fred. So we're juggling a lot of things with our day jobs and everything else. And so we're at a very comfortable place, and it means that we can be pretty darn selective and have to be pretty darn selective just to be able to manage the workload. But often what will come in, so one great example of something that could be a great game but isn't our bailiwick is something that is sort of retelling a reimagination of medieval fantasy games using a D20 or sort of a similar, either OGL or some like very similar kind of system. Yep. And maybe it'll have a really cool world that they've built, or they'll have like really in-depth mechanics for seafaring or combat or something like that. And I might look at that and go, this looks like a lot of fun, but Evil Hat doesn't have a D20 audience. Like if I try we found this out in 2016, 2017, 2018. We don't have a board game audience either. We tried to make a bunch of board games. We even had one that was successfully a couple that were successfully crowdfunded, but we didn't, besides that like one crowdfunding moment, we just didn't have people coming to us for board games. We made, I think, 7 or 8 of them, and they all ended up we either lost money or just sort of barely scraped by on most of them. And it's just not what our audience is looking for. We make story games, indie games, whatever you want to call them, but RPGs that are very player driven, that are very collaborative, that are very play to find out. And that's what people associate with us. And that's where our audience is. So if somebody's designing a game outside of that scope, like it might be a great game, but it's not a great fit for us. There's also stuff where we are really, really trying to share voices of marginalized creators. And so if a game is telling a very normative story, it's got a lot of like unexamined colonialist tropes in it. Doesn't mean I might not have fun playing that game, but I don't want to prioritize that game over something like, say, Apocalypse Keys or Thirsty for Lesbians or, other games that or Girl by Moonlight, other games that I think are not only representing marginalized voices, but also challenging some norms that we really want to see challenged. So, and even that isn't a gimme. Like it isn't for sure that just because something is challenging, it'll be a good fit for us. But we do often look at what is the creator trying to say with this? And is there other games right now that are already saying that? Sometimes it's just like, oh man, you got us right when we picked up a game or we currently have a game in development that's just so close.
Yeah.
Some folks submitted a game to us that were really cool. It's a personal friend of mine, somebody I know who I would have loved to have published their game. And they submitted a game of this like super powerful nobles doing horrible things to each other and political intrigue. And I was really excited about it, but I was like, sorry, we currently have one of those games like in development right now, and it's just too close to it. So, that was, there's so many parameters for what might not fit for us. And
it sounds like one of the takeaways there, Sean, for those that are submitting to you is getting rejected by no means is a commentary on what you submitted, right? Because there's so many factors outside of your game that you have to weigh in on.
Yeah. The rejections that we give can vary dramatically. Sometimes we're just like, this is not a game that we would ever publish because of any of those reasons, right? Like sometimes this is not a game we would publish because of circumstances. Like maybe we would think about this in the future. Sometimes it's like this game looks like it needs a lot of work, but many times we'll look at a game, go, this looks like it's got some really good potential. We'll ask the creator to playtest a game, to run a game for us. We'll play a game online. It's not streamed or anything like that. It's just us playing it. We'll play the game. We'll ask some questions afterward, and then we'll have a discussion. And then sometimes that's still nope, sorry. But if we can, and we can't always do this, but if we can, we'll say, here's what we think it would need to get to the point where we could make you an offer on it. So sometimes we try and say like, maybe you could keep working on this and we could look at it again. And we've gone as many as 3 rounds like that, where we're like, try this. And I've given as much as like 20, 25 pages of feedback. Most games don't get that. Most games get like a 2-paragraph, sorry, or a short bullet list of like, here's what didn't work. But sometimes if we get really deep into it, we've written up very long documents and like tried to help people get there. But ultimately it's their game. Like we can try and help, but maybe our vision for it isn't their vision for it. Or what we need them to do isn't something that they're ready to do or want to do. And sometimes folks will come to us with a game really early on and we're like, we can't really finish the game for you. Like you need to bring us most of a game. Like it's got to be pretty far along because we don't have the resources to to bring it to iron those things out. If you want to do it and bring it back, sure. But so it really varies what folks give to us. I feel better, I guess. I hate sending rejection letters and I have to do it all the time.
Oh, it's gotta be awful.
I feel better when I can at least say, here's the things that we would suggest or that we think it could use.
So Sean, can you think of one of the more recent no-brainers? So in the last 5-10 years, a game that came to you and you're like, yeah, this is going to get made. Like, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
What's one of the more recent versions of that?
Yeah. I mean, there could be bias in this just because it's based on a system that I co-wrote, but Tim Dene brought us Deathmatch Island and I was like, yeah, we have to make this. And I mean, part of it was John Harper said, this is phenomenal.
Yep.
You absolutely need to publish this. Part of it was that Tim is a professional graphic designer. He makes books all the time. So when he gave it to us, it looked very polished.
Yep.
Part of it was that I said, Hunger Games meets X-Files meets Survivor is a lot of fun, but like I don't necessarily like PvP or fighting with other players, or I don't like it unless I know everyone's bought into it. Can we have some options to say, like, what if we want to team up and break the game instead? And Tim was like, yeah, I'm into it. And Tim really, like, the things that we did ask for, Tim really dove into. But it was very, very quick to say, absolutely, for sure, we're going to make this. I feel so bad because I have a couple others that I could say that's true of, but we haven't announced them yet. So
no, we're going to keep our mouth shut. We're going to be good.
Stewpot by Takuma Okada was another one. I had played Stewpot several times. And so and I thought it was like done. I thought it was as done as it was going to get. It's a game of adventurers setting down their swords and staves and picking up aprons and ladles. And I think, I don't know how many D&D games I played when I was a kid where I played a character whose goal in life was to get to rich enough that they could open up their own tavern and retire from life. But you never did that. That was never like a part of the game. And if you tried to do it, D&D just didn't work. And this is the game I was saying, yeah, that's what you want to do. So you play characters who at the start have retired, but they still have all these trappings of adventure. And those trappings are often pretty toxic. There's a lot of murdering things, taking their stuff. And now you're part of a community and trying to give to them. And so you have all these, if you're a wizard, you might be able to cast a fireball. Well, at some point you trade out your ability to cast a fireball to learn a new recipe or help somebody repair their shack, and that becomes your new experience that instead you still technically know how to cast a fireball. It's not as you've forgotten, but it's no longer a game mechanic. You traded an adventuring experience for a community experience. And that then mechanically aids you and helps you. It's what you use in growing further. And the way the characters progress is how they trade in those old experiences for new ones. And you build up your tavern. There's still a game mechanic behind it. You're still trying to have this thriving tavern and do well and resolve issues that come up amongst staff, amongst your patrons in the town itself. But it's this very lovely, very pastoral kind of game set in a backdrop that I think so many of us have thought about or fantasized about, but didn't have a game to do it in. And so there it is. And yeah, Takuma, when they submitted it to us, I was like, oh, absolutely, we have to do this. I played it. I loved it. I already knew about it. I was super excited to do it. So that's another.
Oh, that's really neat. And I think something that's important in here too is that what Sean is talking about, and keep me honest here, Sean, is the process of turning a game into a product for Evil Hat, right? And because there's a lot of things from a brand standpoint that are impacting the types of games that you're going to pick. And you've kind of outlined that for us, which I think is significant. So you are given Deathmatch Island and you say to Tim, hey, Tim, like, shit, no brainer. We're doing this, right? Got a couple thoughts. Tim's like, I'm all in. Like, because he's Tim, 5 seconds later, he comes back fully polished, ready to go.
Remarkable. Yeah. That's not unusual. We probably shouldn't use Tim as our standing example because, I mean, oh boy, is his polish.
Yeah. I find Tim very intimidating in a very complimentary way.
He's such a mild mannered gentleman, but yeah. But
well, again, on top of it, he's like a good human being, right? So you can't even get mad at him. But so once we're there, right? So Tim has made those adjustments to the game.
Yeah.
You're saying, okay, we are ready. We are going to start this development of conveyor belt. What's next?
Yeah. Can I know this is an audio recording, but can I screen share with you just so you can follow along with me?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. We'll make sure everybody that we detail these all. But this is just that Craig and I can kind of, you could see it. And if I skip over something, you can be like, wait, what about this? But this was actually a slide created by Karen Twelves, amazing editor. She did a panel at Big Bet Online where she was talking about her process of getting a game through editing. And while she was doing that, she made this slide. We worked together to make this slide. And so she documented it all. So I asked her right before this call, I'm like, Karen, can you share that with me? Because I'm going to forget half this stuff. And you wrote it all down. So let's make use of that. So, so the green box at the top says writing. That's the game design, really. That's somebody bringing us text. We ask that they bring it to us in raw format, a Google Doc, a Word doc, RTF, something that is not marked up, because unless you are a professional layout designer, most likely we'll have to rip it out of layout, put it back into raw text, edit it, and then put it back into layout again. Like, we've definitely taken games that were in layout, but it's presents some extra steps to do that. So the first thing we'll do, this is after we've accepted it, right? We've gone through the steps you detailed. First thing we'll do is we'll pair somebody up with a system development consultant. And that's someone to address whatever issues we did have with it in the playtest or in the early looks. So can
you give some examples of things like that may be there?
Absolutely. So when we took on Apocalypse Keys, for instance, by Ray Najati, we asked Avery Alder, who is the author of Monster Hearts and a mentor in game design and someone who really, really knows the insides and outsides of PBTA games, both from making them herself, playing them, and mentoring other people and developing them. And so we had Avery as our system development consultant, and she read through Apocalypse Keys. She played a couple games with Ray and really got to and gave her like where we said, oh, here's like maybe 5 to 6, I don't know, maybe more bullet points of things we think need work. Avery gave her super concrete feedback on on either of those things or the things that she found herself. Usually the prompt we give the consultant is, here's the stuff that we have in mind. Please look at that. Please consider that. And then while you're reviewing the game, and then give all your feedback, which, may or may not look like what we said in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And if it does, it's going to be a more nuanced, more well thought out perspective. But we asked them to spend a month or two together hashing through it. Actually, I should take back giving dates. Dates are so flexible in this early process that I say a month or two, but it could be longer, it could be less. Generally speaking, the whole process takes us about 3 years, just to give you a sense of it. But the interior of that process varies wildly. And also, even 3 years is very variable. To give you a sense, we signed on Thirsty Sword Lesbians and Girl by Moonlight the same day. Are you kidding me? Yeah. So those games that came out years apart, we started working on at the exact same time. One just took longer. One just, was more, there was more that was needed. And so that's what we give it. We're very much, until we get to the finishing parts, the very end, the art, the layout, the printing, those things are pretty easy, not easy, but those things, it's pretty manageable to lock in dates. But until then, I'm always of it's done when it's done. I'll put a date on something so that it doesn't just take forever. But if someone says I need more time, we adjust, and there's a lot of adjustment. Anyhow, so we'll do this, and usually that is a lot of back and forth with the consultant and with the designer, and sometimes I, as the project manager, am getting involved, depending on either my availability or my particular familiarity with the game or my interest in the game. Sometimes I'll be involved in those. Sometimes our other Evil Hat staff members will get involved, but it's really the creator and the consultant that are going back and forth. And then either at the same time or right afterwards, we'll then often bring in a cultural consultant. Sometimes we don't bring in a cultural consultant until later on, and we call them a sensitivity reader. A lot of it has to do with the author, how much the author can own the perspective that they're coming from. So, for instance, As the Sun Forever Sets is Riley Daniels' Forged in the Dark game of War of the Worlds, Martian invasion, everything. It's a survival or hex crawl, Forged in the Dark game about overthrowing the British Empire, in a sense, overthrowing the patriarch of the British Empire. And it's a very anti-colonialist game. And Riley very early on was like, I'm a person in England who can tell, I'm a queer person in England who can tell you some of the experiences of colonialism within England. But I can't tell you, but I'm a white person. I can't tell you the experience of a person of color. And you can never have enough perspectives on something, but you definitely realize when there's a critical lacking one. And so we asked Helen Gould, who is a writer and a cultural consultant who also worked on Codex of Worlds, but she is a Black woman who lives in the UK and does cultural consultation there specifically on race inequality and because not everybody speaks for all of their identities. We don't want to say, oh, because you own this identity, you necessarily can consult on that. Not everybody wants to carry that luggage, but that's something that she specifically does. And so we asked Helen, can you come in early on to make sure that this perspective is not overly white, frankly, that isn't prioritizing white people, that is critiquing the whiteness of the patriarchy adequately. And
so real quick on this one, Sean, because this is interesting, because we've heard this before, right? That you need to have sensitivity readers, you need to have a consultant that does this. But what I would love to find out, if it's possible, is a concrete example. Can you think of something that she then brought to the game that ended up impacting it? Do you remember anything that she did that was a change? Because I think it's super interesting, because I don't know if I've ever come across like a concrete example of here's how we made the game better because of this process.
So there were so the good news was that when Helen looked at it, she didn't immediately say, this is an atrocious piece of work, but
that's good.
That was nice. I mean, it's possible. Yeah. I have had a game that we canceled because the sensitivity readers and the cultural consultants were just like, couldn't get to a place where they felt comfortable with it. And that it wasn't something we could publish, It was a lot of good intent, but we couldn't really move forward on it. But this was not the case. But one of the things that Helen identified was language that Riley had used, some sort of unexamined language that sort of sounded perhaps innocuous within the fiction, but carried a lot of cultural weight with it. So there were a few examples of negative traits. And one of them was uneducated.
Oh, that's interesting.
And uneducated was, you can see that education clearly has a value, obviously, but uneducated is a specific term used in a very classist way, at least within the UK, that is really it's much more about racial ethnicity, about class divides than it is truly about education. So you and I, as somebody, and I think we're still affected by something like that. Like uneducated still invokes to us some really negative stereotypes that aren't the kind of thing that we want to reproduce in play, because we don't want to reproduce those patterns in play. It sound like, oh, that's somebody's educated. So she said, what is it you're going for? Are you going for someone who's impulsive? Are you going for somebody who makes rash decisions? If you're going someone with lacking technical skills, there's lots of ways you can come at that without using specific kind of loaded language that has really connotative value. And she found several things like that, things around mental health, things around ability, where ableism and centering whiteness and centering kind of the aristocracy just makes it so that some language that you don't think has connotative value, you don't realize the kind of connotative value that some of your language has. So it's not that like, oh, what you were trying to say was inherently bad,
Right.
but what you were trying to say was bringing some cultural baggage along the way that you don't want, or that you want to challenge. And so she found several things like that. To the extent there was actually one section called the New Century, and it was supposed to be an in-fiction piece, like it's something written in the time of the new century. And literally Riley was struggling to find an authentic voice, find something that doesn't feel like it's written in 2020, written today,
right?
But that isn't, again, reproducing without challenging harmful tropes, right? It's one of these things where you don't want to lie about this world of the past. You're trying to show sort of the atrocities of it, but you're also trying to not let them get away with it. Like,
right.
You don't want to say like, and this was fine. It's all good and dandy. You want to call those things out. And so Helen, usually we just have cultural consultants kind of give advice on things to change. But in this case, Riley really felt like Helen's voice was the best one to use in this, like that Helen actually had a better way of expressing this content herself.
Wow.
And so Helen, in addition to being a cultural consultant, became a contributing author, and she wrote this one little section in fiction that's written by her. And it has an honesty and integrity to it that Riley didn't know how to write herself. It's just this one particular section that she's like, I don't feel like I can write this.
Yeah.
I think I'm used to. And Helen wrote that, in addition to finding so many other little improvements. But a lot of things that came down to just like what your language says without you realizing you're saying it, that I think cultural consultants find and allow you to say like, well, how do you say this in another way that doesn't carry all that baggage with it?
And I think one of the key things you said there that resonated with me, Sean, is improvements, right? And what Riley, there's nothing that Riley did wrong here. Right. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how can we improve the game? How can we let the game get out of its own way in some ways? Right. Yeah. What you're trying to accomplish here, you're blocking yourself by using this angle, by not commenting here, by using this loaded language. You lose nothing by making some of these adjustments. You only gain, right? And you get the game out of its own way. So I love that concept of improvements.
Yeah, that's getting the game out of its own way is a really excellent way of framing it. I think I might steal that. I might use that in the future because it's we're all limited by our own perspectives, but there's definitely times where we have things that we just use the language that kind of is at hand, and having someone else kind of re-examine that and go, is that the best choice? Can help a ton. One thing I've often heard cultural consultants say is if you're trying to make a game that is not offensive or harmful to any group, we can help you. If you don't care, we can't, right? The intent has to be there. If you just take something there, somebody's like, I mean, I have definitely seen submissions, unfortunately, where people are very much just reproducing some very harmful modes of play, some very harmful models, some reenacting some very harmful patterns, right? Not that it's harmful in play per se, but like they're just taking for granted some things. And we're like, yeah, that's like, I don't even know where to start.
Yep.
Like this is not a fit for us because this doesn't represent our values. This doesn't represent the people we care about, want to see uplifted.
And you need an author that and a creator that's ready to hear those things, right? Otherwise you're going to hit an incredible block. This is a complete tangent, but I think it's important. At one point in my career, I was managing a call center, and I was the GM of the call center. There's about 700 employees, and we had this big, like year-end type thing, and I gave a speech. And I inadvertently used a colloquialism that I'd heard my father say a million times.
Right.
And I'm not going to repeat it. But I had an employee come up to me afterwards. She was Native American. And she said, Craig, you said this and it really, like, I don't know if you realize what you said.
Right.
And when she said that to me, I had literally, Sean, no idea what she was talking about.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
you had only heard it in one context.
Right. Exactly.
And I didn't think it was harmful.
No,
right?
No, not at all. And, she sat down with me. And then when she said it, I was like, oh my God. Yeah. Like, I've never thought about it that way. And it was an incredible gift, but it hurt my message, right? So I'm up there in front of all of these people trying to deliver a very specific message, and I got in my own way, and I destroyed, but gained nothing by saying it the way I said it, and
lost credibility, turned some people off, and the people who didn't notice it, the people who are in the same camp as you are, they would have received the message just as well if you had said it another way, right? You weren't conveying anything. Yeah, there are many idioms and colloquialisms that I have really worked hard to try and train myself not to say. And in fact, in general, I found that a lot of times people use idioms in place of actually saying what they want to say. Like they kind of use it to dodge around the truth. Like they don't want to say, I have a problem with this, or this needs to change. And so I find myself often writing them in emails and then going, nope, I'm going to say what I want to say, which is not masking it in some kind of colloquialism that you're like, oh, you'll know what I mean. And I still do it. I mean, I still do it in speech. I still do it in writing. But I definitely think that there's a lot of value to re-examining those for lots of reasons, but certainly cultural sensitivity.
And you want to make sure that you're a person that gives off that I am open to hearing this, right? Because there's people. It was an incredible gift to have that person pull me aside and have that conversation with me, because she didn't need to do that. She just could have said, F you, what a jerk, and wrote me off. But for whatever reason, and she said to me afterwards, she goes, I know that's not what you meant. And I know you didn't mean to do this. So I was incredibly complimented by the fact that she took the time and effort to then go through the whole thing again with me. So I think, and I really appreciate that, Sean, because we hear about it and people, guffaw the sensitivity and the cultural readings and things like that. It's because they don't understand what the hell they're talking about. And they don't. And so giving that concrete example, I think, is very helpful. So we go through the revision process. We have that person and those people from consulting from a gaming perspective, consulting from a sensitivity perspective. During all of this, you have play testing occurring. Can I get a sense of what the play test process is like?
So we actually aren't doing playtests during this part of it. The creator may be playtesting, but we're not open playtesting it yet. At this point, we generally haven't even announced it yet. This is when we still have it just in our hands, and we're still working with it to get it ready to playtest. Often a game will have come to us when it's already been publicly released, like Stewpot had already been publicly released. And so during this period, we're not messing with that at all. If it's someone's already put an itch page up, we just let that be. We're not going to change anything. Once we announce it formally, which is usually our open playtest, that's when we ask the creator to close that down, point them to the Evil Hat page, tell folks if they want to play it, the playtest is open, and how to get it that way. We also always honor early sales. So if somebody bought the game, for instance, Thirsty Sword Lesbians, April had it for sale on itch well before Evil Hat got involved. And so anyone who bought it from her, she stopped sales, but anybody who bought it from her before she stopped them, we honor that. They get the final media, because we just if you bought it once,
it's the right thing to do.
You get it, right? Anywho, so once all the consultation, both cultural and system development, is done, and the writer has made all the revisions, then we start getting it ready for playtest. So we'll do a lightweight edit. That's mostly just trying to ensure that it's readable, that there's no major grammatic or spelling errors, that everything, the clarity is there. We don't need it to be perfect because we know this text is going to change many times, but it's just to get it in a digestible format.
Playable. Yep.
What's that?
Get it playable.
Exactly. And then we ask our editors to use markup, which is like a pseudo HTML like code, where we tag everything so that our graphic designers can import that in and apply styles to it automatically. So if you're familiar with InDesign or other layouts, app software, you might have a paragraph style for heading or a character style that says this is bold and italic or something like that. And instead of the layout artist having to apply all those changes, all those things one by one, we have the editor mark the headings with a heading tag and just like you kind of would imagine with HTML.
Yeah.
And so then when it goes into layout, it's all there. The layout artist just needs to decide, well, what does a heading 1 look like? What does a heading 2 look like? And then once they change that, it changes across the whole document. Anyway, at this stage, we want a layout that is clean, easy to read, but not at all the final result. We're now working with Chris Viana, who is a amazing graphic designer, who is so good that even her playtest layouts look like this could be a final thing. So Chin Chang right now, like she made it, and Banana and the whole team that was on it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I'm like, this is just the beginning. Like Chris will do more, but she made a light mode and a dark mode for it. You know, just too many bells and whistles, honestly. It was amazing. But we'll have the layout artist make the layout. We'll have them make a character sheet so that it's playable. And then we have what we consider like a playtest packet that's ready. And actually, that's not true. There's a few more things that go into it. The other thing that goes in the playtest packet is a feedback form.
Right.
So I have a semi-generic feedback form that I will create a new copy of. It's a Google Doc, a Google form, and I will ask the creator to modify it to ask questions that they need answered for the playtest. And so I'll have this long Google form. I'll create a Discord server just for the playtest, and we'll round up all these links: the sign up link, the feedback link, the link to the files, the link to the Discord, and we announce then we engage the Evil Hat marketing engine. Everybody, so we are now publishing, As the Sun Forever Sets, or whatever games we're publishing. And if you're interested, you can play test it now, because we always like to have our announcements have some kind of call to action. We don't want to just say we're doing a thing. We want to say we're doing a thing, and here's how to get involved. And so we aim for about 250 people signing up to playtest.
Wow.
I've had as few as like 100 and as many as like 1,250.
Unbelievable.
It's a lot. But it always narrows down. There's X number of people will sign up, and then of them, a smaller subset Y will actually play the game, and of them, a smaller subset Z will actually submit feedback. So you kind of have to.
It's a numbers game.
It's a numbers game.
Yeah.
But we set up an automated. As soon as they fill out the form, they get sent the files. They get sent a Discord invite, and we have a server just dedicated for them to be able to talk, for the playtest to be able to talk amongst themselves and to ask questions, both of Evil Hat and of the creator. Sometimes I have to shield the creator a little bit. Sometimes they get a little bit bombarded by folks. And so I will say, you know what? We're going to close that channel. Just ask them to me and I will relay them, because the creator doesn't have the spoons or the time or the emotional energy to respond to those things. Because depending on the playtest group you get, some folks are really like, I'm so excited. And other times you get people who are like, I'm going to find every flaw in your game I can,
Yep.
And they're both, I guess they're both valid ways to playtest. I'm not going to tell somebody you can't playtest it because you're critiquing it. But sometimes we've gotten some like 5-10 page screes on, why this game is wrong. And we're like, I actually think this is just in the game that you were hoping to play. Like maybe this
game wasn't made for you.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yep.
But we're not going to redesign it completely. We're not going to throw away the important tenet pillars of the game.
So real quick on this one, Sean, because I've talked to a lot of creators about the playtest process, but this is unique in the sense that we have really two audience for the playtest, right? We have all of the playtesters, but we have Evil Hat and the creator. And how do you negotiate that? You gave us one example where you had to step forward and say, all of it's going to come through me, and then we will talk to the creator and we'll help negotiate that. And we don't need specifics on this, but has there been situations where playtest Evil Hat feels one way as a result of something that came up in the playtest, and the creator feels a different way? And how do you negotiate something like that?
Sure. Yeah. So it's usually not in this kind of during the playtest period where that will happen.
Yeah.
So during the period, a playtester might say, hey, XYZ, and the the creator will respond back to them. But when it's all done, after the playtest window is closed, we'll share the feedback, both what's said in Discord. We really try to get people to capture their thoughts in the forums, because what's said in Discord can easily be lost. But we try to capture as much as we can in the feedback forums, to the point where I'll say, literally, fill out a form. Don't answer any of the questions except for do you have any other thoughts at the end, and just copy paste this big thing out of Discord in there so that we don't lose it.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to, I don't want to lose it down the line. And so at that point, we'll have feedback, and the number of times that the feedback we've gotten is something we wanted to respond to and the creator didn't, I can probably count on one hand.
Sure.
Like, it's not often, but the few times that it has where we said, yep, I think it's really important. The way that we've come to the way we've reconciled that, and the creator did, the creator said, I don't want to do it. And we said, we think you need to. The way we've reconciled that is usually by saying, let's assume that playtesters are really good at finding out things that don't work for them and really bad about telling you what to do about it. Right. And most creators will go, yeah, I agree. That's sense. So like, okay, they had a problem with this thing. Now, their fix, you don't have to agree with, but let's acknowledge that this gave them some challenge. So does that mean creating more examples to explain it better? Does that mean putting a disclaimer that says, like, yes, this is what I'm trying to do. This is intentional. This is not an accident.
Right.
Does that mean creating some other modes of play where you can give people some options? Because usually if we're really at a point where the creator's like, no, I don't want that, that's because it's a pillar of the game. And they really feel that would change what the game is saying, the message about it. And that's not what we want either.
Right.
So on occasion or two, that's been the end. There's been I think 2 games where we got to this phase and we're like, man, I don't know how to go forward. And we've had to cancel contracts. It's a bummer.
Yep.
People keep their advances. People keep the text. We hand it back to them. We say, cool, keep the money that we gave you in the beginning. You own all rights to the text. We're not going to do anything with it. It's very rare, but but it has happened. But most of the time, it's really just a matter of figuring out, like, okay, we acknowledge that this was a problem. Let's throw away whatever they might have said about how to fix it, and let's talk internally about what we could do. And a lot of times it is just a matter of communication, about clarity. It's not like, this did a thing I hated. And when it has been this did a thing I hated, they've been long talks. I don't know. I don't want to sugarcoat it. They've been like, okay, let's get on a call for an hour or two, and let's pass some drafts back and forth, and let's keep talking until we find like a place where, because ultimately it comes down to our personal value judgments. It comes down to, like, do we as a publisher and as a game designer agree with that statement? Is it one that we care about, and is it one that we want to honor? Because some things we don't think are put in good faith. Someone will like, you can't do this, and we're like, yeah, we can, and we're gonna.
As a matter of fact,
I mean, there were several people who didn't like the "no fascist allowed" statement and "thirsty for lesbians." So, like, yeah, that's okay. You can not like that. You can say that this is a horrible game because we tell people that who we think should play it and who shouldn't, and yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, good news. There's a ton of games out there that don't say it, and if that's a deal breaker, then you've got still a lot of games you can go out there and play. And one thing too that I think is important, at least to note, and we don't have to get into it, is this also has to be a challenge for the creator, I would imagine, too, Sean, because this is a first time. This is lifeblood, right? This has been something that's very important to them. It's been part of them for a lot longer than it's been part of Evil Hat. And to now have a huge volume of feedback, which they've never had before, right? Because they've just haven't had access to that before. To have the publisher have a qualified voice in this process that they have to negotiate with and through. I would imagine for you as the project manager, Sean, you have to be sensitive to the creator in that process too, right? Yeah. And I'm not saying you gotta kid glove them, but you have to acknowledge the fact that this may not be easy.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. I mean, when I've been working with Ray on multiple games, we published Apocalypse Keys. We're working on another game right now that we'll be announcing probably 3 or 4 months. Ray called out to me that like his experience of, his experience working with other people in the industry, but specifically like luminaries, authorities, white people who think they know everything, that those are not always the same category, or the same folks, right. But certainly, his experience of like being in a post-colonial, his experience with colonialism is that it's difficult to tell, and I think this is true for anybody, but I think it can be very difficult to tell somebody in a position of authority or in a perceived position of authority that no, I don't want to make that change.
Yep.
No, I don't want to do that. And so there are a lot of times where I will either qualify something myself, like I'll look at something and go, yeah, I'll put a comment like, yeah, I think we can ignore this. I think this is somebody trying to get in the driver's seat and do design, and they're not giving useful feedback. So a lot of times I have personally like qualified something that I don't think needs to be heavily weighted. Like I'll say like, I think this in terms of your how much time and thought you put into this doesn't need to be heavily weighted versus this is an accessibility issue. Right. This was that needs to be heavily weighted. So I'll put my finger on the scale for sure. Mm-hmm. We'll also sometimes bring back the developmental consultant if they're like, I don't know. I don't know how to read this because we have somebody else who's like a pseudo, who's also sort of an expert in this game right. At this point because of their time with it. And so we'll get their feedback on it. But absolutely, I think there's a lot of sensitivity that's important to have in this stage because it can just be a deluge. It can just be like, oh my God, this waterfall of feedback. And I don't know how to rate which of it I should take seriously, which of it I should ignore, which of it is sacrosanct. Many times what we've done is said, okay, instead of giving you all of this, I'm going to dump it all into a doc and then I'm going to parse through it and I'm going to try and summarize some things or combine some things to say the same thing, or frankly, sometimes just kick out stuff that I think is, not said in good faith.
Well, and experience is super important here because I would admit one of the things that's great about Evil Hat is how many first time people have been published through you, right? That this is their first published game through Evil Hat. But it's a huge value, I think, Sean, in my perspective, that you have done this before. This is not the first time that I've had 100 pieces of feedback from playtest before. It's the first time that you, Craig, have, or Ray or whatever, but I've done this before. And to be able to leverage and bring that expertise in has got to be important.
I hope so. I mean, that's my genuine intent as working with somebody is that we don't overwhelm them, that we don't bombard them with content. And I've definitely had times, sometimes the Discord servers on these playtest groups are a little chirp here, a little chirp there, a few posts, and sometimes they're just bombarding the creator. And I definitely have check-ins. I weekly check in with everybody on every project. So every Tuesday morning at 8:00, Sean sends out 15 emails to one per project to everybody there. And it's like, hey, how's it going? How's progress with this coming? But also like, are you running into any issues? Yeah. And with a playtest with the creators, I'm sometimes checking in to say like, how is this load going for you? Yeah. And some of them really like embrace it, Strash and John LL, who are working on Project Perseus right now. Someone will come to them and be like, hey, I don't like this. And they'll be like, this is why we did it. And this is this. And here's what, and they enjoy that challenge because they'll look at it as like, maybe I'll learn something new. Maybe I will, they're okay. They're fine defending it or going, oh yeah, that's a good idea. But they don't mind.
Strash is unique in that scenario, right? Because Strash started as a playtester, has been through this process several times. Like that's different than somebody who's brand new. So I just love that you have that huge spectrum and you have to cater to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, with different creators and different projects, the amount of support that we're giving on a logistics level, like parsing the data, on an emotional level, let's just get on a call and talk about it. It really varies. Yep. And it's something that is important to us to do to the level that's needed for the project. And so, what that means is that some projects like just take more or less energy. And frankly, if I'm being honest about it, it's about who I want to support, whether I'll put that extra energy into it. So, if we look at the difference between Apocalypse Keys and Deathmatch Island, I'm willing to spend a lot more time supporting Ray than I am Tim. I took Deathmatch Island because it was a slam dunk, no brainer, brilliant game. But Tim is a white guy who's well-to-do, is not somebody that I feel that I need to, that I want to. I mean, everybody's resources are limited, and is not somebody that I want to give a huge amount of resources to. So if he had come with a game that needed a ton of work, that had all kinds of issues that I thought was going to be really hard to get across the finish line, I don't know that I would have taken it.
Right.
And so we really do when we're considering games to publish, and also when we're investing our time and energy into them, we really do focus on like who it is that we want to give that energy to and give that time to. John Harper is a brilliant game designer, and I would love to publish anything he needs. But I also expect that John is going to carry a lot of weight himself. I'm like, you got this, John. And if he doesn't and he needs longer, well, as I said, we got time in the pipe.
Yeah. And credit to all of you on this one, because you know what, your life would be a lot easier if you just published John's game and Tim's game, right? Right, because they're going to bring stuff to you that's fully, and Strash too, right? Like they're gonna bake it for you. There's not going to be a whole lot of thing. But I love the fact that Evil Hat and all of you together have made the decision of we're not going to give everybody equal effort here. There's going to be some creators that come in here that deserve and need more attention and more support than others. And I love the fact that that's acknowledged from the very beginning. And the end result, you end up putting out some pretty freaking amazing games that may not get made anywhere else. And Thirsty Lesbians is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of other publishers doing some very amazing things. And so I don't want to pat ourselves on the back too hard, but I am very proud of the games that we've made and the decisions we've made around publishing them. And, if you take any DEI class, you'll see that infographic about equality versus equity,
right.
And that equality may mean giving everybody the same resources, but equity is about giving people the resources that they need to meet people at the place that they are. And that's what we're really trying to strive towards is equity, justice, we want to go, we don't just want to say, it's one size fits all, because every piece of every game you make is an artistic creation. So there's never a one size fits all to begin with, but there's certainly not when it comes to, the needs of the creator and the needs of the game. They both vary so much.
And I appreciate the transparency of that as well. And I think that when we're talking about the equity piece there, I think transparency is an important part. Small example is when I'm casting for my actual plays, patrons always get first dibs. And it's first come, first serve. But I also say those that have never played before will trump anybody who has played before. Yeah. And diversity is considered. And I'm just transparent about that. Hey, here's that's the deal. And I think that's an important part of this.
You really, if you want to make, I feel if you want to make any difference, you absolutely have to put your thumb on the scale to support people who haven't been supported. Because if you say everybody's welcome, a bunch of cis white dudes show up. And it's not that other people won't, but they won't even have, somebody else might take a minute to think should I do this? Am I qualified? Would this be fun? And by the time they've had that thought process, 50 people have filled the spot. And I know this from, my personal experience with this is when the Fate Worlds line came out. Fate Core was very successful. It was a $3,000 Kickstarter that we made over 300,000 on. It was a phenomenal event. But what it meant is we committed to tons and tons of things, so many things. And one of the things we committed to was creating all these Fate Worlds, which were, custom settings with custom mechanics and pre-built characters and all these things. And we made several Fate Worlds as part of it. And then we decided to continue the line in the Fate Worlds and Adventures line that was powered by our Patreon. And we did that for 2 years, I think.
Wow.
We released over 50 of them. It was a lot of they're all pay what you want. So it's tons of Fate content that you can play for free right now. But when this was 2013, maybe 2014. I was brand new to this. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. We put out an open call and said, hey, do you want to make some Fate content? Submit your thing here. And it was just a flood of cishet straight white dudes.
Yeah.
And there were a few people that weren't. But it was just, and we didn't realize until we were 20 into it that we're like, oh man, wow, all of our creators are white guys. What we didn't even realize it until we stopped to take a look, and we pivoted and we really focused on we stopped the open call and we started bringing in people that we knew we already wanted to work with, and we started taking referrals and we started recruiting folks. But it wasn't until we made the effort to increase our representation that we actually started doing it. And so it is an effort. It isn't you really have to choose what you're trying to focus on. And so,
and we could, and I'll be, Sean, we could do a series of podcasts about this. Is a very big subject and a very serious subject that extends way beyond, tabletop role playing.
Absolutely.
But the one thing that I think is significant here that I don't hear said enough, and then we're going to move on, is that you end up with a better product because of this.
Yeah.
So this isn't just warms and fuzzies. This isn't just social justice. This isn't just all of that's part of this, right? Us wanting to do the right thing. But guess what? You know what the best part is that we end up with a better product when we're done.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So part of the, there's two reasons why I want diversity on my cast as much as possible in my live streams. One, for everything that we just got done talking about, and two, because it makes for a better game. It makes for a better watch.
I mean, Thirsty Sword Lesbians was never going to be written by anybody but April.
Right.
And it's a fucking amazing game.
It really is.
So the emotional arcs of the playbooks is like one of the best pieces of tech that I've ever seen in any game. And I would happily steal that and put it in any game. Just the notion that like every character has an inherent, emotional challenge thing to get through. And then when you're done resolving that, you can change playbooks to your next sort of emotional arc. The fact that when you flirt with people, it's mechanized. So it's like, aha, when you do flirt with somebody, immediately reveal some reason as to why your romance could never work. So that you like immediately create this like sexual romantic tension. Yep. Like that is such brilliant tech. And I mean, I guess somebody else could have made it. I can't say, I'm not a prophet, but April's the one who did it.
It was a unique voice. And there's a reason that game has gotten the attention it has and why it's referred to within the creator community all of the time. Right.
Yeah,
it's what I call a Tom Waits, which is it's the creator's creator. Right. It's what people that are making things refer to all the time in the same way that musicians love Tom Waits, even though Tom Waits is, has barely sold any albums. It was the analogy I used. All right.
Yeah,
so
because
go ahead.
They see that inspiration and it feels so much more design. Yeah.
Place testing is done.
Yep.
What's next?
We get all this feedback. We parse it as we've been discussing. Yep. The creator makes revisions as needed. Sometimes we'll bring back in the developmental consultant, but usually they're at a place where they know what they want to do and they'll make revisions. Then we'll bring it to a sensitivity reader. Earlier on, when I said, we might or might not bring in the cultural consultant, depending on how we need, what was needed. At this point, we always bring in a sensitivity reader. And sometimes we do it, sometimes we'll have multiple sensitivity readers because nobody can cover all perspectives. And so depending on the needs of the game, we might want somebody who can talk about mental health, or we might want somebody who can talk about, how that's depicted, or racial equity issues, or, every game is going to vary. And so we usually bring in 1 to 3 sensitivity readers that are going to read it over, give their feedback. And at this stage, they're often doing word choice as well. But they're also, it's often small refinements. Sometimes they have identified like, you need to include a section about this because you didn't address this issue, and so additional content will be created. But it's really a check. Do we miss anything along the way? Have we slipped? Have we gotten off course? And they're often help us get back on course at that point.
And Sean, do you have a stable of sensitivity readers that you work with? Like where do these people come from?
There was once upon a time this Google Doc that lived out in the world that had like thousands of sensitivity readers on it. And I looked at it and I pulled a few people off it. And then as soon as I did that, it wasn't sensitivity readers specifically for games. It was for authors. And as soon as it was like 2 months after I had found out about it and I started using it, there was a big kerfuffle and they took it down. And I was like, no, I wish I made a copy of that dog. It was so sad. But yeah, so now we have a roster of 15 or 20 folks that we know, and we often get recommendations either from the author because they know somebody else who's kind of working in the field, or from other folks that we work with. And so we very often have some suggestions up front. And then if we don't, the nice thing is, and this is why I really lament Twitter just going into the toilet, is that in the past we've used social media as a way to scout for folks and look at what people are doing and find somebody says they're a sensitivity reader in their profile, and then we'll look on their website and see what work projects they've worked on, and then we'll look at those games or look at those products, or we'll ask folks that they've worked with and then reach out. And so a lot of it is word of mouth. I mean, a lot of publishing is word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say, for a long time, it was also social media, but that's become so fractured. That's really hard to say. It's really hard to say where to look these days. If you go to work.evilhat.com, I think it's either that or evilhat.com/work, one of those two. There's a Google form if you're interested in working with the hat in any of your roles and want us to add you to our potential roster. We've got a Google form there where you can submit your portfolios and things like that. So we look at that as well. So we look at people who have reached out and said, "Hey, I'd like to work with you," and we'll see their stuff.
So you finalize the text as much as it's going to be finalized at this point, right? And now we're going to transition into more of the design aspect of it, which is layout and art. So what's that next step? So we put a cap on the words, and now we're going to go into the look.
There's one more word piece, which is very involved actually, which is the final editing. This is the final layout, the final line and copy edit, and also markup. And so it'll be a back and forth with editing the final text, then revision, back and forth between the editor and the creator to revise. Then it goes into another round of markup, and this is final markup. And then it goes into layout. And pretty much from this point on, the editing on, this is what I consider finishing work. And finishing work is much more quantifiable. A lot of work before this is creative work. Even though we say, oh, we want a game that's ready, it's not really ready. We're still doing tons of edits. But at this point, we're not editing the game anymore. We're finishing it. And now we can start locking things down. We go, okay, this edit should probably take a month and a half and give you 2 more weeks for revisions, then another 2 weeks to do a final edit. Cool. That's when we should have it ready. Then it goes to our, once the markup is done, it goes to our graphic designer. And our graphic designer will, because it has this markup, they can drop it fairly quickly into layout, but then they still need quite a bit of time to make sure the page flow is right. If there's a little snippet here that's running over on a page, they will sometimes go back to the creator and say, hey, we need to cut like 5 words to make this fit right. Or we have a little bit of blank space. But then they're also dropping in placeholders. Generally, our rule of thumb is an image or a table every other page.
Yep.
That's your mileage may vary with that, but we try to keep our text fairly image heavy. We want people to see what we're talking about on the page. Yep. And so we're dropping placeholders in, and we're dropping them in an intelligent fashion. So this is a section about, armies facing off on the battlefield, and maybe we'll drop a wide, short image so that you can see a battlefield with 2 armies on either side of it.
Right.
We can imagine that art being drawn. And we'll create all these placeholder images. And then once the layout is done, we'll send it to the creator, have them make any kind of revisions they want. Then we have a layout draft that's ready to go, and it gets split into 3 places. So one place it goes to is proofreading, because basically you could just never edit your text enough. You will always find errors. Even an editor, Karen is one of the best editors I've ever worked with. And one thing that she'll do is, even once her job's technically done, she's not proofreading, she still looks at it again, because there's things that she'll miss in text that will show up in layout. And she'll just go, oh, I don't know how I didn't miss that before, but now it's obvious. And so it shall be. So, but we'll also send it to a proofreader who is proofing it. We send it to an indexer who's indexing it. And then we send it to an art director. And that's the lion's share of the work, or the majority of the work in this time window is the art, because the art director will create an art inventory doc. That is a list of every place there's a placeholder in the doc, along with the dimensions and the bleeds. So is this again the top edge, the right edge, the left edge, the bottom edge? And does this image need to be filled in background or transparent background? And then they will work with the creator. Sometimes creators, if it's like stretch goals for something like that, we'll have lots of creators in this period, but they'll work with the creators who will make like an art request doc. They're like, I'd like these kind of things. The creators give pretty wide ideas of the art they have in mind. And then the art director codifies that and writes an art order or an art brief that will go to an artist. And so the art inventory doc says, here's how big every piece is. And that figures out our pay scale, if it's half page, quarter page, etc., or a portion of a page that it is. And here's the kind of general, like what's happening in the text in that section. But then the art director fills out the full, they fill out the technical specs, like we need 600 DPI, CMYK,
right?
Art with quarter inch bleeds, etc. But most importantly, fill out the creative component, which is like, this is heavily inspired by Steven Universe and She-Ra. We want lots of purples and pinks. Here's some existing art that we are inspired by. Here's what we want in this piece. It's a lion centaur, and what's going on in the image.
Who's making sure that the look and feel is consistent at this point? Because it's not only just the art that's chosen, that's created, the layout, the format of the page, like all of that holistically. Is there somebody who's boss over all of that, or am I making sense?
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. And the answer is we have to live in a fluid world where there's sort of many bosses. So
got it.
There are basically 3 authorities in this 3 or 4 authorities in this. So Fred Hicks, our president, is the product authority. Fred is going to say that won't catch people's eyes. That cover won't catch people's eyes in a game store. We need something that is bolder, brighter, etc. We have the creator, who's the creative authority on it, saying like, I need to see, the cover of Thirsty for Lesbians. Like, I need to see these 2 people with swords locked, but looking at each other like they just want to kiss, right? Like that is what this game is about. We have myself, who is the contract authority. I'm like, we can afford this much money. We can get this much time, And then the 4th authority is the art director, who is an authority when it comes to working with the artists themselves. They're the ones who are going to send the artist back. Nope, make this revision, do this. But they ultimately kind of have to, they ultimately have to work with Fred, the creator, and myself to make sure it's meeting all those other criteria. And so there's a lot of cooks in this kitchen. And that is because exactly what you said, there's so much holistically that matters that we need a lot of perspectives. We can't just sometimes creators have visions that don't translate well immediately, but art director can take that and go, okay, this is how that could work on a page. And sometimes, even after that happens, we will realize like, yeah, but that isn't going to serve our marketing needs. Like at the end of the day, the front cover of the book is marketing. We changed the front cover of Girl by Moonlight. We had one. We ended up switching it around to be one that we felt like we still use the art. We put it in somewhere else so it didn't get lost. Mm-hmm. But we just looked at it and we're like, it's beautiful, but it does not punch enough. It was too painterly. It wasn't comic enough. The colors weren't bold enough. And so we recommissioned a new piece. And it was after it was all done, and we just kind of looked back and went, no, we need to dive back into that. So that was one of those cases where, would have loved it if we'd caught it earlier, but sometimes you just have to commission more art. That's something that you do.
And after this, we obviously finalize everything and we quote unquote send it to the printer, right? We close things down. What I want to get a sense of before we wrap up this segment, which has been incredibly informative, Sean, thank you, Absolutely. Is it's exactly why I wanted you on the show, is where there's something else happening here. Yeah. And that's that we got to sell this damn thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's do this in the context of it's going to be crowdfunded. Where in this long snake of a process that we've talked about, when does that start? When do we start going, okay, we need to now start up the marketing engine?
Yeah. So our perspective on crowdfunding is that we used to call it kick finishers. We want to crowdfund something that is nearly ready.
Yeah.
And we do that for a couple of reasons. One, it's tax reasons. We would really like to ship out the product for the money we received in the same fiscal year.
Makes sense.
If we can get money in and then pay for all the books and all the printing, it makes our taxes much easier to do. We don't deal with deferrals and all this stuff. So that's just a simple version. Two, we like to make our customers happy. A Kickstarter that ships within 6 months is our crowdfunding project that ships within 6 months is pretty satisfying, right? A lot of people are like, oh, I just backed this and I have it already. It wasn't 3 years later and it finally arrived. So, and four, it just kind of fits fits the way we manage things. So,
right.
When we crowdfund something, the day one, update one, the moment we launch, there is a link to a PDF that is everything but the art. It's the full thing, all the text, edited, laid out. It is playable. The character sheets are there. You can play it immediately. We didn't touch on Roll20 and creating character sheets there, but we'll have done that as well. Yep. So we'll often say, here's the PDF you can play from. Here is character sheets in Roll20. And we've even built a free Roll20 quick start to kind of like with some of the art and a few other things to kind of just get you playing online immediately. And so for us, it's really once that layout draft is complete, that's when we could crowdfund it.
Right.
Before that point, we've engaged, we've already talked to our marketing, our marketing department, which is Tom. Tom is queuing. We're reaching out to BackerKit or whoever we're crowdfunding with, and we're telling them about it. We're building the campaign in the background. We are telling our graphic designer to be building a bunch of graphic assets. Depending on the project, sometimes we're doing a lot of crowd outreach where we're talking to streamers about running it on their channels, or we're trying to get interviews lined up.
Right.
That, with Codex of Worlds, we barely did it. We're like, what? Monster of the Week has a ton of fans. We don't need to do all this stuff. But with Girl by Moonlight, brand new game, first time creator, we really wanted to give it everything we got. So we did we lined up tons of interviews and actual plays and all kinds of things with Andrew and sponsored a bunch of streams and really went all at it. But that planning for us, because we've done it so many times, it usually takes like 2 months. I think if it's your first time, you probably want to give it 4 to 6, just because you don't have, a list of people just to reach out to and say, hey, will you stream this, right? You've got to find that list and build it up. But usually a couple months beforehand, we are starting to sow the seeds of it, getting it prepared. And then once that art incomplete, we'll also commission some crowdfunding art. So we usually commission a cover. We usually commission the iconic characters, like the playbooks or whatnot, the character art, and maybe a scene or two. And that way, the book isn't completely art-free, but more importantly, we have art to use in the crowdfunding campaign. Yep. So, because art sells books. End of the day. People will play the game because it's a good game, but they will buy the book because it's got a pretty cover, right? Like
great way to put it.
That's just our experience. So, so it's while art is being developed that we have, the indexing happening, the proofreading happening, the art happening. That's when we're crowdfunding. It also means that our backers are sort of our last line of defense and typo finding,
Yep.
because at this point, if they find anything, they can report it to us and we can still fold it in and make change. We haven't totally finalized it.
Got it.
But my goal is by the time the crowdfunding ends, which is a month or so, we're already a ways into our art. Within a couple months after that, the art's finished and we can send it off to the printer. And that's how we get the 6 to 9 month-ish window of, we crowdfunded it and boom, then it goes to the printer. But that's all happening. There's a lot of stuff happens all at once, and it's busy making. I can tell you. It's for a 6-person group, we have a graphic designer who's like, I need you to be doing layout, but also I need you to be making Roll20 assets, but also I need you to be making crowdfunding assets. And we really try to keep it measured and not pile too much on at once. But sometimes you
it has to get done.
You just have to eat the whole elephant, right? You gotta just do it all. And
so, as we close out here, Sean, what we've just talked about is how you do it today.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go back in time and think of what you've learned? So in the years that you've been doing this with Evil Hat, what have you personally learned in your role that really stands out? What do you do now that you didn't do before? What did you used to do that you don't do now?
Yeah, there's so many ad hoc things we used to just kind of, I guess we should do that. Yeah, crap. Let's do it. Whoops. That are now just ingrained into our process. So sensitivity reading was not always in that. It was not always a process. The distinction between the art inventory and the art order, it used to just be like, make an art order. But now having a spreadsheet with all of the pieces that are needed just creates so much clarity there. The system development consultation used to be like, well, the creator just sort of knows what their game should be. And then we'd run into problems down the line where we're like, wait, these mechanics don't match up. Like, oops, and we'd be backfilling it much later than we wanted. Shadow of the Century, we had 3 rounds of playtesting. That was a lot. This is the most we've ever done. But that was just like, I don't think we got it the first time. We didn't get it the second time. Oh, we finally got it the third time. That game took a really long time to make. And it's in part because, a lot of these processes just weren't in the mix.
Yep.
The other thing that we didn't do as much and we've done much more, which slowed things down, but I think in a good way, is that now we ask the creator, what's your idea for the layout before we ever start doing the layout?
That makes sense.
We're like, what color schemes do you want? What kind, are there fonts or things that you're really excited about? Are there other books that you really like and you want to see something similar? Because Fred Hicks for the longest time did our layout, and Fred is a lovely human being, and I would go to battle for him. But once he's finished a whole layout, the last thing he likes hearing is like, "Oh, I don't like it. Could you do it different?" It's a frustrating thing to hear when you've put all this, because it is creative work. Layout is very creative, and it takes a lot of energy. And part of that was just we didn't ask the artist what they want or the creator what they wanted beforehand. We figured, we'll intuit it somehow. Well, of course, we got it right a little bit of the time and got it wrong quite a bit of the time, and had to make revisions. And now by asking people in advance, that allows Fred, or now Chris, who's taken over that role, to collaborate with the creator, figure out what they're all about, and then do the layout design. And also, we used to just do the whole thing in one pass, or not one pass, but we do the whole thing and then show it to them. Now I'll show them like, this is what a character sheet would look like. This is what a page of text would look like. This is what, other things look like. Do you want to make changes in the design phase before we actually drop everything in the layout? I'm sure there's there's a million other little things, but it's definitely the codifying of these phases that used to be much more ad hoc. The other thing that I do is I just religiously send check-ins. I just every week, Tuesday morning, 8:00, I have a calendar reminder for myself on Monday to write all the check-ins. I write them all. I hit schedule send. I schedule them to go out Tuesday morning, 8:00. I've missed them on occasion, traveling or whatnot.
Sure.
But is a very different experience. I've been told this by many of the people I've worked with. It's a very different experience to be checked in with every week and say, hey, how's it going? Can I help you out? Do you need, what's the progress on this? Than to only be checked in on when something's running late.
Yep.
When if I only reach out to you because you haven't turned something in, it feels punitive or like you're in trouble. If I'm just saying this is the regular, this is how we keep open lines of communication, then even if something runs late, it doesn't feel like I'm just reaching out because of that. And people who work with me know that I am, unless we're in that finishing state where we're at some tough deadline, I am very, very flexible where I say, we have enough stuff in the pipe. If this needs to take longer, it takes longer. That's okay. But I think it's hard to trust that if all you ever hear is, you're late, when's it going to come in? And that's not a good feeling.
No, it's not. And it's extremely valuable. And that is something that everybody listening, that works everywhere. I use that all the time with my staff, right? I have weekly check-ins with my staff because not only is it just like you said, like if Craig puts something in my calendar, oh my God, what is going on right now?
Right.
Versus
trouble.
Right. Versus this is my Wednesday 2:00 with Craig. Right.
Yeah.
The other valuable thing there too, Sean, for me, and I wonder if it is for you, is this isn't the first time we've talked about it because we've been talking every week. Right. Yeah. So we're hitting the ground running. So when a problem appears, we probably have been talking about this problem on the horizon. It's getting closer. How are we doing? This is not the first time we've talked about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's definitely times where we have these check-ins, then that triggers for me, an internal check with the rest of the hat where I go, hey, Fred, what are your thoughts on bringing on another person to do this? Hey, Chris, could you create a character sheet, an early mock-up of a character sheet so that this creator can kind of wrap their head around what it's going to look like? Hey, Tom, can you spread the word? We don't have enough playtesters for this playtest yet. Can you put a newsletter out to remind people about it? And so I can then try and, use our internal resources in between checks as well. So the next time we talk about it, I can say, hey, good news. We've got XYZ resources, or I found an editor, or I found this, So it's infrequent enough that I can get some work done in between, and so can the creator, but it's frequent enough that, like you said, we're not, there's not too many surprises. Sometimes things happen, life happens.
Yep.
But a lot of times we are working through things bit by bit, and it's not like you need to figure it all out in one meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. No question. I'm about to put you on the spot like big time, Sean. So I'm going to apologize in advance. So I'd like for you to open up the Evil Hat website for me real quick.
All right. You got it.
Let me know when you're ready.
Loading this page. Come on, Evil Hat. Don't be slow for me right now. All right.
All right. So there is a ton of games that's on that site right now that we've already talked about. There's a ton of games on that site that we don't need to talk about because everybody knows them, right? Yep. What I would love to hear from you when you look at this site, is there 2 or 3 games that it breaks your heart don't get more attention?
Oh boy. So there's a couple that, there's one in particular that I guess I cry about every time. And that's War of Ashes, Fate of Aegyptus. So many moons ago, the company Zombie Smith reached out to us and said, we have these really cute minis. They're these furry monsters, and we have this game where they all murder each other. It's all driven by climate change. Like, it's getting colder and there's less land for people to live on. And the cold is actually represented by these, it is not only colder, but there are these monsters called the Cold, which is just the cold, really. And they're adorable, but they're also destructive, and they just eat everything, and there's these great pictures of one with like a bunch of swords and shields in their mouth, and they're just chopping away at it. And they ride these giant snails. They're super cute. But they said, we want to make a RPG about this minis game. And so we said, okay, let's try it. So we used Fate Accelerated, which is not a crunchy tactical game at all, but we added froth mechanics, and which is part of the game. And we added zone aspects that made it really important to keep moving around throughout the battlefield. And we had tons of lore, and Sophie Lagasse wrote it, and her partner Edmund did all these little short story snippets of it. And we went back and forth for 2 years, over and over and over again, design this game, and I absolutely loved the game. And when we released it, we thought there was going to be like a marketing effort. We didn't have a marketing plan. we thought there was some other marketing that was going to happen. It didn't. We didn't crowdfund it. We didn't really talk about it. We just kind of went like, it's out, and nobody knew about it, and nobody bought it. And now it is only available in PDF because we had to mulch like 1,000 copies because they were just sitting in a warehouse and no one was buying them. And we tried to give it love so many times, but the thing is, when you come out with a game, it has one short window to be new, and after that, it'll still sell well if it's Blades in the Dark and people love it. Blades sells every day. That's great. But if no one's heard of it, no one's playing it, it's so hard to get people's attention. And we were paying for that warehouse space. And month after month, we're paying for that warehouse space. And we finally went, we'll sell it on huge discount. And we sold some that way. And we tried everything we could, but we never got a momentum behind it. And that game was so good. It was called Grimsicle because it was both grim and whimsical. It was just so cute. It was these maniacal Muppets. And when we were up at Go Play Northwest, they had this free table where people putting out games, and someone put a copy of it out there, and Karen grabbed it. She's like, every time I can, I want to give this to somebody when I hear about it. And we've run out of our copy. Like I had a bunch of copies and I've given them all away. We're run out. It's like, I'm going to grab this. Next time I'm chilling it, I'll give it to somebody because a lot of times we talk about it. Somebody's like, oh, that's so cool. And we're like, yeah, but it's out, but it's gone. We can't. You can still get the PDF, which is great. But there's something about having the dead tree in your hand that feels really satisfying.
Oh my goodness.
So that's a heartbreaker for me. You can find it, but it's not anywhere on our main page because we have resigned to the fact that it is not ever going to be a big seller. And that's just,
it sucks.
It sucks. It makes me sad,
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the biggest heartbreaker for me. I think the other game that I think had its swan song and is probably right now very much back catalog, but I think it's just such a fun game. It's Bubble Gumshoe by Emily Care Boss and Ken Hite and Lisa Steele. They did a great job of reproducing the Veronica Mars teenager sleuth with all the teen problems plus the mystery solving of Gumshoe. And I think it's a fun romp. So. And I think that is still available in print.
It is, yeah.
Maybe not for much longer. I don't know. It will not get another run. When it's sold out, it'll be sold out. But it's a very fun game, and I think it's just it had a brief moment in the spotlight, and that moment is past.
Well, and it's an opportunity to get something from Ken where someone's heart's not getting ripped out by page 4, which is always good.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, most of the time it's not.
All right, guys, we're going to take one more break. When we get back from this break, we're going to get to one of my favorite segments. We're going to find out what Sean's been grooving on. We'll be right back. Are you enjoying our long-form interviews with creatives on this podcast? Maybe you're craving deeper discussions about our guests or some of the RPG plays on our Twitch and YouTube channel. Well, I've got an opportunity for you. You see, Third Floor Wars now has a Patreon-only Discord server. You can join a vibrant community of like-minded enthusiasts diving deep into every episode of our RPG plays and podcast, connect with fans, engage in spirited discussions, and unlock the behind-the-scenes insights. For just $1 a month, access a world of tabletop gaming goodness. Connect with passionate gamers who share your love for the Tabletop Podcast and everything produced on the third floor. As a Patreon supporter, you also enjoy ad-free episodes of this podcast. You can immerse yourselves in captivating stories and fascinating interviews without interruptions, taking your listening experience to a whole new level. By joining the Third Floor Wars Patreon community, you not only gain exclusive access to the Patreon-only Discord server, but you also support the growth of my podcast and channels. Your contributions enable me to continue creating high-quality content that entertains, educates, and upskills tabletop enthusiasts like yourself. Maybe don't wait. Join the Third Floor Wars Patreon today and unlock a world of camaraderie, discussions, and knowledge. Visit patreon.com/Third Floor Wars or check the link in the show notes and come join our community. The Third Floor Wars Patreon-only Discord server awaits you. I and the other patrons can't wait to welcome you with open arms and a fistful of dice. So, Sean, this is something that kind of organically came out of nowhere. It's become one of my favorite segments in the show, and I like to find out what creators are eating. So instead of just making stuff, what is stuff that's that you're buying, that you're consuming? So, is there any books, movies, music, video games, RPGs, or anything that just got its hooks into you and wouldn't let go recently?
It's funny because one of the casualties of doing this work is that a lot of games that I play are playtests of games that we're thinking about publishing.
Yeah,
that's my dominant game that I'll play is whatever Evil Hat might be publishing. So a lot of those I can't talk about specifically either because we took a pass on them or because we've accepted them, but we haven't
announced it.
But I will say there's two games. I'll just sort of highlight some elements of two games, and then I can go into some actual titles. I can give you names of.
Okay, good.
You're
so cryptic, Sean.
I think on Andrew's interview, they said, "I'm into being gay. That's the product I want to sell people." So I feel like if Andrew could say "be gay," I could say like, "Check out cool games." I think that's a fair thing to shell. So one of them was a Paragon game, which already, I'm like a little predisposed to, a little bit. But it did this super cool thing with factions where one, if you work for a faction, they give you certain assets, and those assets allow you to freeze dice, and so you can basically reduce some of the randomness because Paragon games can be very swingy, and so. They allow you to lock a die in place rather than roll it. And so you can just say like, I'm using this resource from this faction. But if you do that, then when you get glory or the equivalent of glory in this game, you have to share it with the faction. And the players advances, but so do the factions. And they also can be opposing you. Like sometimes you're working with a faction and advancing them, but sometimes you're like fighting your own people. And so they also win challenges that you lose and they advance that way. And so there's this advancement that's happening on both sides of the spectrum. And since there's so many important factions, seeing them achieve their goals and having them grow and having that make major turning points in the game is very exciting. And I just love this like new bit of tech. I'm like, ooh,
that is cool.
Smart. Yeah.
And this is one we can't give the title of yet.
I can't. I know.
Okay. All right. Cool. Right. That's something to look forward to.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But I will. Okay. I have one more game that I can't talk about.
Yeah.
But there's a game that involves sort of story mending, as it were.
What does that mean?
Your characters who sort of travel through fictional narratives, through stories, other people's stories. So you might go into a rom-com, or you might go into some other a princess story, right? And something's gone wrong. Something has kind of corrupted that story. And so you're sort of interdimensional firefighters, as it were. And you jump into genre, and your characters are all very versed in genre emulation. But it means that like you get to kind of play, it's a little bit slidersy. You get to kind of play in different sorts of genres each time you're playing. And there's both like wink and a nod to it. Like you can both be very in the genre, and you can also sort of like step out and be like, yeah, but we're from another realm. And anyway, it's I had a lot of fun playtesting that recently.
That's cool.
It's just cool to be like, aha, we're sort of this, but we're sort of that, and we know what's going on. We're on the know. There's a very fun framework for the game. Okay, but some things that I'm grokking on that I can actually name rather than just say like play games that are good. I'm sure you know, because Allison's episode, which is going to drop after this is recorded, but before. Yes, but it will already be dropped already be out by the time this comes
Correct.
out. I'm sure she's talked about the ABC, the Asynchronous Book Club, and her gift to the Little Oracles and her gift to the Everyday Creative about encouraging folks to read books and to talk about what they're reading and in a very similar manner. And I had really let my reading slip for a long time because it just wasn't making time for it. And thanks to Allison and the ABC and the Little Oracles, I really dove back in. And so there's a couple books that I would love to talk about that I have read recently. One of them is several of these are classics. These are not anything new, but they're very significant. So the first one was Parable of the Summer by Octavia Butler. It was very timely to read it because there's an opera out now, and I was able to
I didn't know that.
And the operatic version was amazing. And I was very, very glad to have read the book recently so that I could be like, not only do I know the story, but I kind of know it in detail, it's
fresh,
so fresh in my head. I went with some friends who had not read it, and they enjoyed it, but they enjoyed the opera, but they got a different experience out of it than I did. But it's about climate change disaster, and and somebody's ability to thrive and to exist in that, and somebody with and a Black girl with a disability. Really,
right.
It's really somebody who has a lot of challenges in their life and still thriving and still finding a future. And I think it's a seminal work. I think everybody should read it, but it feels very relevant, even though it's 30 years old. It's
amazing.
It still feels like it's written for today.
Yeah.
The other one that I also encouraged by Allison was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley.
We talked about that. What a freaking book.
It's so amazing. And I had never read the original, and I read it and I was like, wait, why does cinema depict Frankenstein's monster as this groaning, moaning, unintelligent creature when it's the most eloquent and thoughtful of characters in the whole story? I mean, Frankenstein's monster is by far the most sympathetic character, but also just sheds so much light on the cruelty of humans. And then we see movies and it just groans and it outrages me because it's the character is such a good one.
And the Kenneth Branagh one tried it a little bit. De Niro played Frankenstein's monster, but they still couldn't get rid of the trope. They still could lean in the way it is. And Frankenstein and Bram Stoker's Dracula are two books that I tell people, if you've not read them, you have to read them. They're not what you think that they are.
Yeah.
They're very different than what they are. And when you read Bram Stoker's Dracula, you have to remember there was no vampire genre.
Right.
You have to read this with fresh eyes.
Right.
And when you read Bram Stoker's Dracula and think I don't know what vampires are, and you read that for the first time, that book will scare the shit out of you.
Yeah.
Right. I remember reading it and they talk about, Count Dracula climbing up the side of the castle. And in a moment, I was just I know vampires, so I wasn't that surprised about it, but I was imagine reading this for the first time. The other thing too, especially with Frankenstein, is who wrote it.
Yeah. Mary Shelley is amazing.
I mean,
and her mother
was
is amazing.
Freaking 19 or 20 years old when she wrote it. It's an unbelievable piece of work. And some have cited it as the first science fiction novel ever written. And that, she really is the mother of science fiction in a lot of ways. And I think that there's an argument to be made for that. So yeah, I'm all in on Frankenstein, man. Yeah.
It was such a delight to read. The frame was amazing. The fact that the story was written, at the very least, it's always, these are letters sent. And so at the very least, you're one frame in, but sometimes you're two or even three frames in. You're writing letters of people recounting stories. It's, and when you think about that, you're like, oh, this is all in the frame of a letter, from Robert. I think the our primary narrator, who you immediately forget because he's almost not a character. But then in the end, he gets sort of reintroduced as he finally kind of like steps back into the, and starts telling, basically catches up to the present and is telling his own story. It's just such a
great book.
The framework is just incredible.
Yeah.
And then the show that I've just devoured and loved. There's several shows we've been watching, but this one just really just dug into me. I was sitting on the couch with Karen, and we were watching a show on Apple TV. I think we're watching Ted Lasso. And at the beginning of Apple TV episodes, it always gives you a little trailer for another Apple TV show. And we were watching it, and we just see this long set of stairs in this cylindrical room, and we see this like diagram, and immediately, like, nobody said anything or done anything, and immediately Karen and I just grabbed each other, and we're like, oh my God, is this Silo? Is this Wool? Is this, and we could just tell just from the visuals of like 3 seconds of visuals. We're like, I think this is Silo, because we read those books by Hugh Howey years ago and loved them. I mean, we tore through all 3 books. They're huge books, and we just tore them up. And when we saw that little bit, we're like, I think this is Silo. And then we watched the rest of the trailer, like, yes, it is. We're like, I almost didn't care what they did with it. I was almost like, no matter what, I want to see it. And then I watched it, and it was so good. It was just, it's not the same story. They make a lot of art. They make a lot of choices that are different than the books, but in no way did that feel untrue to the story. It felt like, this is what you can tell in this medium. And that's fine. There's so many bits that they did that were different, and I ate them all up. Like every episode, we were just like, the moment it dropped, we were watching it. God, it's so good. Silo,
and you can't spoil it, because I am now on episode 4. So Silo has become I just recently had surgery, so I've got some extra time on my hands, because I'm not working. Yeah. And Silo has become my show. I completely missed the boat on the books. No idea that the books even existed. Kept hearing, have you seen Silo? In fact, I think it was on Ty and That Guy podcast, which is Ty Franks, who is one of the people that wrote Leviathan Wakes, which became The Expanse. Right. And then one of the actors. It's a great podcast. But they mentioned Silo. They're like he loved it. And Ty Franks is kind of a dick. But I like him, like his sensibilities. Yeah. I like him as a writer. And generally speaking, every time he said, I like this, I'm like, I like that too. Yeah. And so based off of that, I went and dude, episode 1, I'm like, I was shocked how original it felt. Yeah. Because it's not that original, but there's an angle, and I'm only 4 episodes in, but there's an angle that they're coming at here that makes this feel very, very fresh. Yeah. And it's got murder mystery in it, which I'm just a freaking sucker for. Yeah. It delivers so well. Hugh, we just watched John Wick 4 last night. And one of the things we were commenting as we were watching it is that how big the world of John Wick feels without ever explaining itself. They never tell you what a crest is or what a marker is. You just find out from context. And even though John is our point of view character, you just know there's like 100,000 assassins out there. Like the world is so big and so dense, and it looks both very much like a world and very different than our world. And the world building that they do in those movies makes that setting really compelling and interesting outside of any action scene or dialogue they have. It's just the things that you pick up on of like, what is this? What's the table? All this stuff that, and I think Silo does the same thing. I think Silo just really makes a world that you're just very compelled by. And, post-apocalyptic is certainly not a new genre, but their stance on it is, Hugh Howey's stance on it is absolutely amazing. And, Common, Rebecca Ferguson, oh my God, they're just so good. Tim Robbins, like I hate hating Tim Robbins, but like he's good to hate too. Like, everybody in it is like, again, they're just so in the world that they, this is actors' jobs, right? Is to make these worlds come alive, but they just kill it, and
it's just a delight. And I don't want to spoil any of it for you or
No, don't.
Or I would just say watch it because every single episode is a all-star. Like there's the one that I didn't love.
It's really astounding. And you have just pinpointed something I couldn't put my finger on that hooked me and made me love it. And it's the same thing that I loved about the remake of Battlestar Galactica. It's the same thing I loved about The Expanse. And it's the same thing that I now realize that I love about Silo, which is time was spent saying, if our premise is true, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And it's the little things. It's the in the Battlestar Galactica, the fact that there's no corners on any of the pages, right? In The Expanse, the Belter accent.
Yeah.
In Silo, and they don't explain this initially, but in the Covenant, there is nothing. It's against the law to mechanize going up and down the silo.
Yeah.
And it's one thing just to say that. It's another thing to have gone through and say, okay, what now? So what does that mean then?
Right.
Right. And
all these couriers running up and down the stairs all the time.
It's little stuff like that, Sean, that I'm like, I'm in. Let's do this.
Yeah. It's a fantastic series. It's a fantastic set of books. I love those books. I like I said, I'm not a fast reader by any stretch, but I devoured those. In that same vein, I mean, all of these are sort of futury, but in that same vein, first Alien movie, it's a great horror movie. Absolutely. No doubt that the story of Alien is great, but the world of Alien is so compelling. You're just like, I love one of my favorite scenes in that whole movie is really early on. There's no consequence of this plot wise, but they're in this engine room and they're fixing the engine and like water is just spraying everywhere. And this is just normal. They're just like, yeah, this is just like shit that happens. Like, this is how this stuff works. It's half broken. It's fine because it just felt so lived in. And, Jared Sorensen, who wrote Inspectors, told me a story one time, and I think about it very often when I think about making games feel real, is that he said, there was an interview with a city sanitation worker who, that inspired him. And the sanitation worker said the problem was going in the sewers is that rats would would scurry up your pants, and then they would gravitate towards your crotch because it was warm and it was really hard. And like people would get freaked out about, rats. And so the answer was to duct tape your pants closed. It wasn't to get rid of the rats. It wasn't not to go down there. It was, so now we duct tape our pants closed so rats can't climb up them. It was just like, that's the world we live in.
Yep.
Shit happens. And there's no good fix for it. So we just kind of figured out a way to make do. And like that, like sensibility of like, yeah, sometimes rats climb up your pants, right? Like that's terrifying, but also like, so now we duct tape them so it doesn't happen as much. Like, I just love that detail.
I do too.
Like, yeah. And that's like the vibe of Inspectors. Like, yeah, there's ghosts and they're gross and they do strange things. So like, so we try to make that not happen. Like we also know that like, it's still gonna happen and we can't really stop it completely. And I love worlds that where you're just like, things are imperfect and broken and like people just figure out how to work around them. And yeah.
And there's a consistency that's there, right? Again, like if we're accepting this premise, what does that really mean? And going through all the iterations of detail real quick on Alien, because this ties what I said about Bram Stoker's Dracula. People forget what Ridley Scott did with Alien is created a whole new genre of science fiction, because up to that point, there was no lived in future. Everything was shiny. Everything was Logan's Run. Everything was Kubrick's 2001.
Right.
What Ridley Scott gave us is an entire new genre of science fiction. There's no Expanse. There's a whole host of stuff that never would have happened had he not created that world.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a, it opened up so many doors and it is still just, I could watch that movie today and I'd still
totally holds up.
Love the little details that you collect along the way. I mean, my favorite episodes of The Expanse were like the first, I don't know, half of the first season before they kind of like got together as a group, before they kind of solidified like what they were doing. It was just the like, weird vignettes of the world. And like,
Yep.
I didn't know what was going on in the UN or the belt or anything like that, but I was just experiencing it and just going like, wow, this is cool. And yeah, of course in Mars, they have less gravity. And if a terraforming project failed, then they were going to be, have a lot of struggles to deal with. Just talk about it forever. But yeah, I love a world that you can, because you can imagine telling your own stories in those worlds, right? Like there's room to tell your own story. When you have the hardest thing I ever had with Star Wars was I love Star Wars. I watched the movies over and over and over and over again. And we get to the RPG and we're like, cool, what do we do? And we're like, I don't know, because the stories that I know are Luke and Leia and Han.
Yep.
And I don't know where to start. And we did. And eventually you carve out enough of a world to make it your own, and you start telling your own stories. But it took us a while to get started.
Yeah.
It's why any polished world I play in, or any very filled world that doesn't have those gaps, I will automatically like wreck something in it to create a crater. So like I was running a Dune game, and in my Dune game, I just said Jamis killed Paul in their duel. Paul's dead. Jamis has taken up some of his essence. So Jamis now is he the Kwisatz Haderach? Probably not. But like, does he have something going on? Definitely.
We're off book.
We're off book. Like there is no more canon. There's no like all the characters that we love except for Paul are still there.
Right.
But like now this is your story. Now do with it whatever you want. You don't have to try and fit within the space that is left by Paul, because he takes up everything. He takes all oxygen out of the room, at least in the first book. Now do whatever you want. And, I got that because I listened to Judd Carlman's Sons of Cryos podcast 1,000 years ago. And they said the first thing they did when they were running in Forgotten Realms was to kill Elminster. Yep, he's gone. Elminster's gone. What happens next? And I was like, oh, that's smart. That's smart. Just take that character that's just like sucking up all the air out of the room and just get rid of them, and then say like, well, now there's a vacuum. Who's going to fill it? You are, the players. You're going to be the ones to do something cool, rather than like watching somebody else do something cool.
Oh,
anyway.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Sean, there is a lot of really cool things to do on a Monday night that doesn't involve spending a couple hours with me. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, it's totally been my pleasure. This has been great.
This was a lot of fun. And those of you listening, this is the end. You made it. I appreciate you listening. Take care.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to Tabletop Talk and share it with your friends. Check out our content on YouTube and Twitch. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and stay updated on everything coming from Third Floor. All the links are in the show notes. Take care, floorheads.
He's also the developmental editor of Apocalypse Keys and Plagues in the Dark, and co-author of Agon.
Agon. However you like it. People say it lots of different ways.
And co-author of Agon. I don't know why I
like if you think agony, just
agony. Okay, got it.
Agon.
I did that to Andrew. Did Andrew tell you that?
No.
Andrew had to run and take a break. When they came back, I did what I just did with you, which is let me capture this first segment, and then I know to restart the second segment and stuff. I forgot to hit record. We talked for an hour and a half. And literally, as I was closing out, about to hit the end of it, I went, "Oh my God, Andrew, you're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you." And literally the next day, they were like, "Yep, let's do it again." I'm like, "God bless you."
Oh man, that's so sweet of them.
Oh,
they're
what a good human.
Yeah, very good human. Yeah.
All right, so I want a concrete example of where bringing her in had an impact on the game. Dude, that was amazing.
I'm so glad. I hope
you put it all out there.
Yeah, I'm really. I'll stop sharing. There we go. Yeah, I'm so glad to talk to you about it, because so often people are like, "What's involved?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna have to sell this again."
No, you just send the link.
I don't usually go into the detail that we're going now, but I'm going into the detail now, so that next time someone asks me, I'll be like, "Listen, there you go. I've answered it. Here it is. Go to Craig. He knows the drill."
Perfect. All right, I'll bring us back. Oh, hey, are you still here? Wow. Well, the episode is over, but if you're bored, why not go to patreon.com and support the show for as little as $1 a month? Yeah, you can just scroll down and get the link. It's Patreon that makes this and all of our other content possible. Don't you want to join the other floorheads on the Patreon Discord? Anyway, thanks for sticking around. Take care.